"You're late," my mom said as she stepped onto the porch, tugging her suitcase behind her. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. 6:02 a.m., 2 minutes late. "Mom," I called, forcing a smile as I climbed out of the car to help with her luggage. But before I could reach the porch, I saw her, Lauren. My sister emerged from the house, dragging her own suitcase behind her like a queen with a train. My smile faltered. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. Mom turned to me, her expression unnervingly cheerful. "Oh, Violet, we decided Lauren should come instead of you. She's been so stressed lately, and this trip will be good for her." My chest tightened, a cold wave of disbelief washing over me. "Instead of me?" My voice wavered. "Mom, I've been planning this trip for years. I pay for everything." She waved her hand dismissively as though I'd just pointed out the weather. "And we're so grateful, sweetheart, but you work so hard. You can take another trip later. Lauren needs this right now." Lauren didn't even bother pretending to look remorseful. She leaned against the porch railing, her smirk as smug as it was infuriating. "Thanks for understanding, sis," she said, her tone dripping with false gratitude. My hands balled into fists at my sides. My dad appeared then, shuffling out of the house like a guilty shadow, carrying his suitcase. He didn't meet my eyes as he handed it to me. "This is unbelievable," I said, my voice trembling. "This was supposed to be my trip, something for me to share with you." Mom's smile didn't waver. "And it still is, sweetie. Just with Lauren instead. Don't make this a big deal. Your sister really needs a break." I stared at them, my parents and my sister, the family I had spent 2 years working overtime to treat. Flights, luxury hotels, guided tours. Every detail meticulously planned and paid for by me. And here they were, swapping me out like an afterthought. Lauren climbed into the back seat of my car without so much as a thank you. And in that moment, a truth I'd been avoiding for years finally hit me. It didn't matter what I did or how hard I worked. To them, Lauren would always come first. I forced a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Let's get going then," I said, my voice flat. If they wanted Lauren to replace me, fine, but they wouldn't enjoy it on my terms. The drive to the airport was suffocating. Lauren chattered endlessly from the back seat. "Oh my gosh, Mom, did you see that TikTok about Paris? I can't wait to go shopping there. Do you think we'll have time, or will the tours take up the whole day?" My grip on the steering wheel tightened as I stared straight ahead. Mom chuckled softly. "Of course, we'll have time. We'll figure it out when we get there." They didn't even seem to notice I wasn't part of that "we" anymore. At one point, Dad cleared his throat. "Thank you for driving us, Violet. I know this probably feels unusual." I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, my expression unreadable. "Unusual. That's one way to put it, Dad." He shifted uncomfortably, clearly regretting the comment. Lauren leaned forward, her voice grating in my ears. "You're not mad, right? I mean, this is really big of you, letting me go. I could never afford this on my own." I clenched my jaw, biting back every sharp retort clawing its way up my throat. "Of course, Lauren. Enjoy the trip." When we finally reached the airport drop-off zone, my patience was on its last thread. I helped unload their luggage in silence. Mom hugged me lightly. "Thank you for understanding, sweetheart. This means so much to us, and to Lauren." I nodded stiffly. "Sure, Mom." Lauren beamed as she wheeled her suitcase toward the terminal. "Thanks, Violet. You're the best." I stood there watching them disappear, the sting of betrayal sharp and deep. My car felt empty on the drive back home, the silence heavier than any words. Their voices echoed in my mind. "Lauren needs this right now. You're always working." I parked in my driveway, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. For a moment, I just sat there, letting the weight of everything sink in. Then, without a second thought, I marched into the house, powered up my laptop, and logged into every travel account I used to plan their dream trip. Hotel reservations, canceled. Tours, refunded. Airline upgrades, gone. As the confirmation emails poured into my inbox, I felt the tightness in my chest start to ease. If they wanted to take Lauren instead of me, fine, but they wouldn't be staying in 5-star hotels or enjoying private tours on my dime. When I finally closed my laptop, a rare sense of satisfaction settled over me. They could explain themselves to the front desk staff in Paris. I was done being their doormat. The call started as soon as their flight landed. My phone buzzed relentlessly as I unpacked the suitcase I carefully packed for the trip that was no longer mine. The irony wasn't lost on me as I hung up dresses and lined up shoes I had planned to wear strolling through Paris. The buzzing continued, a relentless vibration that filled the room. I sighed, picking up the phone to glance at the screen. My mom's name flashed across it, alongside a flurry of missed calls and texts. I scrolled through the messages. "Violet, what's going on? The hotel won't let us check in. The reservation is missing. Call me immediately. Violet, this isn't funny. Fix this now." A laugh escaped me, sharp and bitter. Fix this? They actually thought I'd swoop in and save the day after what they'd done. The phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Lauren. I let it ring out and listened to her voicemail out of morbid curiosity. "This is so petty," she snapped, her voice dripping with entitlement. "We're stuck here because of you. You need to call the hotel and fix it. Now." I rolled my eyes and deleted the message without listening to the rest. For years, I'd been their fixer, the one who smoothed over every mistake and picked up every slack. Not anymore. Eventually, I decided to answer, if only to stop the barrage of calls. As soon as I picked up, my mom's voice hit me like a tidal wave of anger. "Violet, what did you do? The hotel says the reservation was canceled. None of the tours are booked anymore." I let her rant for a moment before replying, calm and steady. "I canceled them." There was a long, stunned silence before she hissed, "Why would you do that?" "Oh, I don't know," I said, my tone dripping with sarcasm. "Maybe because you decided to take Lauren on my trip? You're lucky I even drove you to the airport." "We thought you'd understand," she snapped. "Understand what?" My voice rose. That years of saving and planning didn't matter because Lauren needed a break. That my hard work meant nothing to you? Guess what, Mom? I don't understand, and I don't care to. Before she could respond, I hung up and turned my phone off, tossing it onto the couch. The silence that followed was blissful, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. That peace lasted all of one day. By the next morning, the buzzing started again. Calls, texts, voicemails, one after another. At first, I ignored them, spending my day cleaning the house and catching up on work. But by evening, curiosity got the better of me. I opened my phone and braced myself for the storm of messages. From Mom. "Violet, you've gone too far. Your sister is in tears, and your father is furious. We can't get into any of the hotels you booked." From Lauren. "You're acting like a child. I don't get why you're making this such a big deal. Just fix it already." And finally, from Dad. "We need to talk. This isn't right." I set the phone down and shook my head. For years, I'd been the one to fix things, to make sure everyone else was comfortable and happy. Now that I'd taken a step back, they didn't know how to handle it. Pouring myself a cup of tea, I sat at the kitchen table, letting the anger simmer. How dare they expect me to clean up their mess? How dare they act like I was the one in the wrong? The next call came minutes later, and this time I answered. "Violet," my mom barked before I could say a word. "This isn't funny anymore. We're stranded. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" I took a slow sip of tea, savoring the moment. "Embarrassing? You think this is embarrassing? Try saving for years, planning every detail, only to be told you're not even part of the trip you paid for." "Stop being dramatic," she snapped. "Lauren needed this more than you." "And now," I said firmly, "she can figure it out. You made your decision, Mom. You wanted to take Lauren instead of me." "Fine." He sighed heavily, the silence stretching between us. "Violet, I understand you're upset, but family sticks together. We don't do this to each other." I let out a bitter laugh, the sound sharp and unrestrained. "Funny, Dad. I was just thinking the same thing. Isn't that what family's supposed to do? Stick together. Respect each other? Because it sure doesn't feel like you've been holding up your end." In the background, I heard Lauren's unmistakable voice whining, "Mom, just hang up on her. She's being impossible." That was the final straw. My grip on the phone tightened as I spoke, my voice cold and unyielding. "Enjoy your trip." "Oh wait, you can't, because it's not your trip. It was mine. And now, it's nobody's." I hung up before he could respond, turning my phone off and tossing it onto the couch. For the rest of the evening, I alternated between simmering anger and an unexpected sense of relief. I finally stood up for myself, finally stopped letting them use me as a convenient scapegoat. They could call me dramatic all they wanted. This time, I wasn't bending. The next few days were blissfully quiet. With my phone turned off, I reclaimed a kind of peace I hadn't realized I'd been missing. My mornings were spent sipping coffee on the back porch, basking in the calm. Afternoons were dedicated to catching up on work and tackling projects I'd been putting off for months. Slowly, I remembered what it felt like to put myself first. By the third day, curiosity crept back in. I turned my phone on, half dreading and half expecting the flood of messages waiting for me. Over a dozen voicemails filled my inbox. My mom's were first, each one escalating in tone. "Violet, you need to call me back right now. This has gone too far. I can't believe you're doing this. You've humiliated us. We're your parents. How could you treat us this way?" Lauren's messages followed, laced with her trademark entitlement. "This is so petty, even for you. You're ruining everything. Just fix it, Violet." And finally, my dad. "Violet, I don't understand what's happened to you. Call us back so we can sort this out." I deleted every message without replying, letting their words vanish into the ether. This wasn't about a single ruined trip. It was about years of being overlooked, dismissed, and treated as an afterthought. This wasn't just a breaking point. It was the moment I finally decided to stop playing the role they'd assigned me. That evening, my best friend Grace showed up unannounced, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee and wearing a look of unmistakable curiosity. "I heard about what happened," she said, setting the coffee on my kitchen table. "Your mom called me yesterday." Of course she had. My mom had always been a master at recruiting allies to guilt-trip me into compliance. "And?" I asked, taking a sip of coffee. Grace shrugged, a sly smile spreading across her face. "I told her you were probably busy and that you'd get back to her when you were ready." I laughed, shaking my head. "You're the best." "No," Grace said, her tone softening. "You're the best, because you finally stood up for yourself. I know how hard that is, Violet. Don't let them drag you back down." Her words stayed with me long after she left. She was right. I'd spent my entire life bending over backward to please people who never seemed to care about my efforts. It was time to break that cycle once and for all. By the weekend, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Clarity. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it was tempered by something more powerful. Freedom. Freedom from their endless demands, from their expectations, from the suffocating role of the family fixer. But as expected, the silence didn't last. Sunday afternoon, my phone buzzed with yet another call. This time, I decided to answer. "Violet," my dad began, his voice heavy with weariness, "your mom wanted me to call. She thinks you'll listen to me." "Go on," I said, leaning back in my chair. He sighed, the sound laden with frustration. "Look, this has all gotten out of hand. Your mom's upset, Lauren's furious, and well, it's just a mess. But you're better than this." I stiffened, his words igniting a fresh wave of anger. "Better than what, Dad?" "Standing up for myself. Refusing to let you walk all over me again." "That's not what I meant," he said quickly, his tone defensive. "It's just, you've always been the reasonable one. The one who keeps everything together. This isn't like you." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "You're right, it's not like me, because for the first time, I'm not bending over backward to clean up your mess." He paused, and for a fleeting moment, I thought he might finally understand. But when he spoke again, his words dashed that hope. "Violet, we're family. Can't you just let this go?" And there it was, the same excuse they'd always used to justify their behavior. "Let this go." I repeated, my voice hard. "No, Dad, this isn't something I can just let go. Maybe you and Mom need to finally understand that actions have consequences. And this is yours." Before he could respond, I hung up, feeling a strange sense of finality. For once, I wasn't the one cleaning up the mess. But then he said, "You're punishing a whole family over one decision. Is that really fair?" "Fair?" I repeated, my voice rising as the words boiled up from a place I'd kept buried for too long. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you and Mom decided I wasn't important enough to be part of the trip I planned? Was it fair when you replaced me with Lauren like I didn't matter?" "That's not what we were trying to do," he said defensively. "We just thought Lauren needed it more." "Of course you did," I snapped, the anger spilling over now. "You always think she needs more attention, more support, more of everything. and I'm always the one expected to sacrifice for her. Well, not anymore. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Finally, he said, I don't know what you want me to say. I don't need you to say anything, I replied, my voice steady and firm. I just need you to understand that I'm done being the afterthought. From now on, I come first. Goodbye, Dad. I ended the call and set the phone down, my hands trembling. For the rest of the day, I let myself feel everything: anger, sadness, relief. It wasn't easy, but it felt like the start of something new. I wasn't the family's fixer anymore, and I wasn't going to be. They'd have to figure out how to clean up their own messes. When my parents and Lauren finally returned from their disastrous trip, I was waiting for them at their house. I parked in their driveway, sipping coffee on the porch swing and feeling surprisingly calm as I watched their taxi pull up. As they stepped out, dragging their suitcases behind them, their faces were a mix of exhaustion and irritation. Lauren was the first to speak, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Well, I hope you're happy, Violet. I raised an eyebrow but stayed seated. Happy about what? Our trip was a disaster, my mom snapped, throwing her hands up in exasperation. We spent the entire week in dingy hotels, eating terrible food because we couldn't afford anything decent. And don't even get me started on the tours. Oh wait, there weren't any, Lauren chimed in, crossing her arms. Do you know how embarrassing it was to show up and be told there was no reservation? I took another sip of coffee, letting their complaints wash over me like background noise. Sounds rough, I said finally, my voice calm. But you wanted to take Lauren, remember? I'm sure you all had some great bonding time. That's not the point, my mom shot back, her voice rising. You knew we couldn't afford all the things you planned. You set us up to fail. I stood up slowly, setting my mug down on the table next to me. No, Mom, I didn't set you up for anything. I planned a trip for the three of us, something special I've been saving for years. You're the ones who decided to cut me out at the last second. My dad finally spoke, his tone quieter but still accusatory. You didn't have to cancel everything, Violet. That was extreme. Was it? I asked, crossing my arms. Why should I have paid for a trip I wasn't even invited to? If Lauren needed it so badly, you should have planned it yourselves. You're lucky I didn't cancel the return flights. Lauren rolled her eyes. You're so dramatic. It's just money, Violet. And you're so entitled, I shot back, my patience snapping. Do you have any idea how much work and sacrifice went into planning that trip? Or do you just assume things magically appear for you because someone else takes care of it? They stood there, stunned into silence. I've spent years being the responsible one. I continued, my voice steady but firm. The one who fixes things, plans things, makes sure everything runs smoothly. And you've spent just as long taking it all for granted. That's not fair, my mom started, but I held up a hand to stop her. No, Mom. What's not fair is how you treated me. You chose Lauren over me, like always, so I chose to stop being your doormat. You didn't want me on the trip. Fine, but you don't get to enjoy the benefits of my hard work without me. I grabbed my bag from the porch swing and turned to leave. I'm glad you're back safely, but don't expect things to go back to the way they were. I'm done. As I walked to my car, I heard them calling after me, their voices a mix of anger and guilt. But I didn't look back. The drive home felt strange, peaceful, even. For years, every visit had left me emotionally drained, but this time I felt lighter. I finally said everything I'd been holding in, and for once, I wasn't worried about their reaction. When I got back to my house, I made a cup of tea and sat on the couch, replaying the confrontation in my head. They'd been so sure I'd fold that I'd give in like always. But this time, I didn't, and it felt like freedom. Watching their stunned faces as I walked away was a powerful reminder of how much I'd changed. They could be angry, hurt, or embarrassed. It didn't matter anymore. I was done living my life to meet their expectations. The next day, Grace called. How'd it go? She asked, skipping any pleasantries. I laughed, leaning back against the kitchen counter. Exactly like you'd imagine. They're furious. Lauren's pouting and Mom is probably strategizing how to guilt me back into line. Grace snorted. Let her try. You've got a backbone now, and I'm here to make sure it stays in place. I grinned, grateful for her unwavering support. Thanks, Grace. I mean it, you've been my rock through all of this. Anytime, she said, her voice softening. So what's next for you? now that you're not playing family fixer anymore? That question had been circling my mind since the confrontation. What was next? For years, so much of my energy had been poured into trying to please my family, trying to earn their approval. Now that I've let go of that burden, the possibilities felt endless and a little intimidating. I don't know yet, I admitted. But for the first time, I feel like I get to decide. Not them, not anyone else, just me. Sounds like the start of something amazing, Grace said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Over the next few weeks, I started making small changes that felt monumental in their own way. I redecorated my living room, trading the hand-me-down furniture from my parents for pieces that felt uniquely mine. I spent weekends exploring local cafes and parks, things I'd always meant to do but never made time for. And I started journaling, writing down my thoughts and dreams without filtering them through the lens of anyone else's expectations. Each small step felt like reclaiming a part of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost. One evening, I sat down with my laptop and opened the spreadsheet I'd used to plan the trip. The canceled reservation stared back at me, but instead of feeling regret, I felt a surge of determination. That money had been meant for a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I wasn't going to let it go to waste. Closing the spreadsheet, I opened a new browser tab and typed solo travel ideas. A few weeks after my parents returned, I booked a solo trip to Italy. It wasn't the same itinerary I planned for them, and it wasn't about proving a point anymore. This was for me, a chance to celebrate my independence and finally put myself first. The moment I landed in Rome, a mix of excitement and nervousness coursed through me. I'd never traveled alone before, but as I stepped out of the airport and into the bustling city, I knew I'd made the right decision. I spent my days wandering cobblestone streets, marveling at ancient ruins, and indulging in meals at charming little cafes. There was no schedule, no one else to consider, just me and the freedom to do exactly what I wanted. One afternoon, while sitting on the Spanish steps with a gelato in hand, I pulled out the journal I'd brought with me. For years, I'd written about what I wanted to achieve, but those dreams were always tied to making someone else happy. Now, as I wrote, the focus shifted. Learn a new language, start a small business, travel to at least 5 more countries. The list grew, each goal a reflection of the life I wanted to create, not the one I'd been expected to live. On my last night in Florence, I had dinner at a small family-run restaurant overlooking the Arno River. As I watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, a deep sense of peace settled over me. This trip had been more than just a vacation. It was a turning point. I'd spent so much of my life trying to earn my family's approval. But here, thousands of miles away, I realized something important. I didn't need it. I was enough just as I was. When I returned home, my parents tried to reach out again, this time with softer tones and carefully worded messages. Hope you had a nice trip, read one text from my mom. Maybe we can all talk soon. I stared at the message for a moment before setting my phone down. I wasn't ready to reply, and that was okay. This time, it would be on my terms. As I unpacked my suitcase and placed souvenirs on my shelves, a quiet sense of pride settled over me. I'd taken a leap for myself, and it felt like a victory. A week after returning from my trip, my phone buzzed with a call from my mom. This time I answered. "Hi, Violet," she began, her tone unusually soft. "How was your trip?" "It was amazing," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "That's good to hear," she said, pausing as though searching for the right words. "We've been thinking a lot about what happened. Maybe we handled things poorly." The admission surprised me, but I wasn't ready to let her off the hook just yet. "Poorly?" I echoed. "You replaced me on a trip I planned and paid for without even asking." "Poorly is an understatement." "I know," she said quietly. "Your dad and I, we didn't realize how much it would hurt you." "And Lauren?" I asked. Does she feel bad too, or is she still blaming me for ruining her vacation? "She's upset," my mom admitted, "but I think she knows she could have handled things better." I sighed, leaning against the counter. "Mom, this isn't just about the trip. It's about years of putting her first and expecting me to pick up the slack. I'm not doing it anymore." "I understand," she said after a moment. "We're going to try to do better. We don't want to lose you." Her words tugged at something deep inside me, but I'd learned enough not to let guilt dictate my choices. "I'm glad to hear that," I said. "But it's going to take more than words to fix this. I need to see real effort, not just apologies." "You will," she promised. We'll give you the space you need, but I hope you'll let us back in someday." After the call ended, I felt a mix of emotions. Relief that they were finally acknowledging their behavior and skepticism about whether they actually change. But as I sat down with my journal that evening, I realized something important. Whether or not they changed wasn't my responsibility. Over the following months, I kept my boundaries firm. I responded to their calls and texts when I felt like it, but I didn't go out of my way to fix things or smooth over conflicts. Instead, I focused on building the life I wanted. I signed up for a photography class, something I'd always dreamed of doing but never made time for. I joined a local hiking group and began planning my next solo trip. Each step I took felt like reclaiming another part of myself that I'd lost along the way. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I realized just how far I'd come. I wasn't the person who bent over backward for people who didn't appreciate me. I was someone who valued herself, set boundaries, and wasn't afraid to stand up for what she deserved. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly free.